we are living through what may be the most politically volatile week in recent American history. A sixth assassination attempt on a sitting president, a twice-indicted former FBI director claiming a seashell arrangement was pure coincidence, and the Democratic Party hiding its own post-election autopsy from the very people who funded it. The institutions that are supposed to hold this country together are fracturing in real time, and the question is whether anyone in Washington has the courage to say so out loud. Joining me now are Sophia Reeves, our economics and markets editor, and James Chen, our geopolitical analyst. Sophia, let me start with you. Is the Democratic Party's refusal to release this autopsy evidence of a party that simply cannot face the truth about itself?
Thanks, Emma. And yes, absolutely, unambiguously yes. Look, this is a party that raised over $1 billion in 2024, lost the presidency, lost the Senate, and couldn't retake the House. They're not a messaging problem. That is not a candidate problem. That is a fundamental ideological rupture between the Democratic Party's leadership class and the actual voters they claim to represent. The fact that DNC Chairman Ken Martin initially promised transparency and then quietly buried this report in December 2025 tells you everything. They know what's in it. They know it says, stop chasing progressive ideological purity. Stop treating working-class Americans like they're morally deficient for having traditional values. Stop the identity politics obsession. And they simply cannot bring themselves to do it. Ben Shapiro has been saying for years that the Democrats have become a party of the credentialed elite, utterly disconnected from the people they once claimed to champion. This buried autopsy is the proof. And frankly, the assassination attempt culture that has developed around Trump is the other side of the same coin. When you convince your base that the opposition is literally fascist, you should not be surprised by what follows.
But Sophia, devil's advocate here, isn't every political party entitled to keep its internal strategic review private? The Republicans have done exactly the same after previous defeats. And on the assassination attempt, are we really drawing a direct line between political rhetoric and individual violent acts? James, what's your take on this?
Well, look, Sophia's making important points, but I think she's conflating two separate issues in a way that muddies the analysis. On the autopsy, yes, it's politically embarrassing that it's being suppressed, but the real story here is the Comey indictment. And that story is fundamentally about institutional accountability, not culture war. Here's what matters. James Comey ran the FBI. He had access to the most sensitive intelligence in the world. He then posts, or claims to stumble across, a seashell arrangement reading 8647, which is unambiguously interpreted as a call to eliminate the 47th president. And his defense is essentially, I didn't mean it. The DOJ indicted him twice. That tells you the evidence is serious and specific. The data on political violence is also damning. ACLED documented a 300% increase in political violence incidents between 2016 and 2020. 300%. That didn't happen in a vacuum. That happened in a media environment where every major network was describing Trump as an existential threat to democracy every single night.
I hear what James is saying, but with respect, separating the Comey story from the broader cultural context completely misses the point. Look, 6 assassination attempts. 6. No modern president in American history has faced that. And every single time the mainstream media coverage lasts 48 hours, and then they pivot back to complaining about Trump's tone. The asymmetry is breathtaking. If a Republican pastor had stood up the morning after an attempt on a Democratic president and compared the other side to Confederates, every network in America would run it wall to wall for a week. Instead, Reverend Rigby does exactly that, and it gets buried. This is not a coincidence. This is a media ecosystem that has decided one side of American politics is legitimate and the other is not. And when you delegitimize tens of millions of people, you license extremism against them. Douglas Murray has made this argument with devastating precision. You cannot call someone a fascist for 4 years and then act surprised when someone decides fascists deserve to be stopped by any means necessary.
Here's what I want to know, and I want both of you on this. Where does this actually end? The Comey indictment, the suppressed autopsy, the escalating political temperature. James, where do you see this going over the next 6 months?
The way I see this playing out, there are really two possible paths. The first is that the Comey prosecution is seen by the left as pure political retribution, and if that happens, the rhetoric escalates further, not less. The second path, which I genuinely think is possible, is that consistent institutional accountability, prosecuting people regardless of their political connections, actually begins to restore some credibility to the justice system. The risk is that it's very hard to do the second thing without it looking like the first, particularly in a media environment that will frame every prosecution of a Democrat as fascism. The suppressed autopsy is the wild card. That document is going to leak, and when it does, it could trigger the internal Democratic civil war that the party leadership has been desperately trying to prevent before the 2026 midterms.
Here's what concerns me most, and I think this is the scenario nobody wants to discuss. If the trajectory of political violence continues, if we get to a seventh or eighth attempt, and if the rhetoric from the institutional left continues to provide the cultural oxygen for it, we are not just talking about political dysfunction. We are talking about a genuine crisis of democratic legitimacy. History tells us that democracies don't usually collapse from a single dramatic moment. They erode increment by increment until the institutions that are supposed to hold everything together simply stop being trusted by enough people to function. The DNC hiding its autopsy, Comey posting what he posted, a pastor using an assassination attempt as a sermon prop. These are individually manageable. Together, they are a picture of an institution in advanced decay. And the risk is that by the time everyone agrees something must be done, it's already too late.
Sophia, Reeves, James Chen, two sharp minds, not entirely in agreement, both worried about where this is going. One thing is certain. Somewhere in Washington tonight, there's a very thick document in a very locked drawer, and the people who wrote it are not sleeping well.